as the clock struck midnight, heralding the arrival of my 23rd birthday. I felt a surge of melancholy wash over me. The laughter and cheers of my celebrating friends seemed distant and hollow, a cruel memory of my impending doom. Days earlier, I had received a peculiar gift from an enigmatic old woman. It was a wooden box, intricately carved with symbols and adorned with a heavy brass lock. The woman warned me in a hushed whisper that it held a terrible secret that would haunt me forever if I dared open it. Despite my growing unease, curiosity ignored at me. On my birthday, I found myself in my dimly lit apartment, the box resting ominously on the coffee table. The resilience of the night pressed down on me, suffocating my thoughts. Mustering a trembling hand, I reached for the brass lock and turned the key. The box groaned open, revealing its macabre contents. Inside lay a single yellowed photograph, a haunting image of a young woman with piercing eyes and a haunting smile. As I gazed at the photograph, a chilling realization washed over me. The woman in the picture was my exact double, down to the smallest detail. Her name was scribbled on the back in a faded ink. Eleanor. A surge of icy terror ran through my veins as I felt an inexplicable connection to this unknown stranger. Moments later, my body began to tremble uncontrollably. My vision blurred and a putrid stench filled the air. I felt a sharp pain in my chest and coughed up a mouthful of blood. My screams echoed through the empty apartment, but they were swallowed by the suffocating darkness. As the agony intensified, I stumbled to my feet and stumbled towards the window, desperate for air. But as I reached for the curtains, I was horrified to see my own reflection staring back at me from the glass. Eleanor's eyes burned with an otherworldly glow, her smile twisted with a sinister grin. Panic seized me as I realized that the woman in the photograph was not a stranger at all. She was a malevolent entity that had somehow taken possession of my body. I fought desperately, but my resistance was futile. Eleanor's cold, merciless eyes watched with amusement as she extinguished the last remnants of my consciousness. When I woke, I was in a different place. It was dark, desolate room with cold stone walls and the musty smell of decay. A single buried window allowed a faint glimmer of light to penetrate the suffocating gloom. As my eyes adjusted, I realized that I was trapped in a dungeon. The walls were covered in a grotesque graffiti, scrawled in blood and human feces. I stumbled to my feet, the cold, damp floor sending shivers down my spine. Fear gnawed at me as I explored my prison. There was no food or water, and the air was thick with the stench of death. I was alone in this forsaken place, doomed to a slow and agonizing demise. Days turned into nights, and still I languished in my living tomb. Hunger and thirst tormented my body, and despair consumed my mind. I cried out for help, but my pleas were met only with silence. One night, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the wall behind me. I held my breath, listening intently. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I pressed my ear against the cold stone, but all I could hear was the beating of my own terrified heart. Suddenly, the wall began to crack and crumble, revealing a narrow, dark passageway. I hesitated for a moment, torn between hope and terror. But desperation drove me forward, and I crawled through the opening into the unknown. The passageway twisted and turned, its walls closing in on me like the jaws of a hungry beast. I stumbled and fell, but I forced myself to continue crawling. Finally, I reached to the end of the tunnel and emerged into a small, dimly lit room. The room was filled with flickering candles, casting an eerie glow on the walls. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, and on top of the table lay a single, bloody knife. As I approached the table, I realized that the knife was not alone. There was a human hand lying next to it, its fingers curled into a deathly grip. I gasped in horror and stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. But before I could flee, the door to the room slammed shut behind me. I was trapped, alone with a bloody hand with the ominous knife. Frozen in terror, I watched as the candles began to flicker violently. The shadow danced and swayed, transforming into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock my fear. I felt my sanity slipping away as the darkness enveloped me, suffocating my hope like a cold, wet blanket. Suddenly, I heard a faint moan behind me. I turned slowly, my eyes wide with terror, and saw Eleanor standing in the doorway. Her eyes burned with the infernal glow, and her smile was twisted into a malevolent sneer. "Happy birthday, my dear," she whispered in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "It's time for you to die." With lightning speed, she lunged at me with a bloody knife. I dodged her attack, stumbled backward, but her relentless pursuit was too much for me to bear. Concerned and desperate, I grabbed my nearby candlestick and hurled it at her. The candlestick struck her in the head, and she let out a deafening scream. The bloody knife fell from her grasp, and I seized the opportunity to flee. I stumbled and fell, but I managed to crawl towards the open passageway. As I passed out of the room, I could hear Eleanor's enraged screams echoing behind me. I crawled and crawled, driven by a primal instinct to survive. The tunnel seemed endless, but I refused to give up. Finally, I reached to the end of the passageway and collapsed on the cold, damp floor. I had escaped, but I knew that my nightmare was far from over. Eleanor would be waiting for me, lurking in the shadows, biding her time for revenge. I stumbled down to the dungeon and screamed for help, but my voice is lost in the vastness of the forest. As I run, I can hear Eleanor's laughter echoing through the trees, a cruel and mocking sound that haunts my every step. The night is dark and endless. I am lost and alone. I can feel Eleanor's presence closing in on me, her icy breath on my neck. I know that she will find me, and when she does, she will finish what she started. And so, I run. I run until my lungs burn and my legs give away. I run until I collapse on the cold, unforgiving ground, my body broken and my spirit shattered. Eleanor stands over me, her eyes glowing with triumph. She raises the bloody knife high above her head, and as she plunges into my flesh, I feel the cold embrace of death. My last breath escapes me in a desperate whisper. Happy birthday to me.